All right, so I appreciate you getting out of your comfort zone and working with some different teachers today because, number one, this is one thing that we want our kids to be able to do. We don't always have them group themselves. A lot of times we homogeneously group them or heterogeneously group them depending on what we're working on, and we need to be able to understand where they're coming from. Sometimes they're not going to feel as flexible in sharing. Now, if you were sitting with your department, I'm sure you would be much more open to sharing than sitting with people that you're not really familiar with. So that's something we need to keep in mind, which is why some of these get to know you games at the beginning of the year are so important, so that you get a feel of community in your classroom. Okay, so I don't think I put a color back there. What color are you?
They're confused, red and blue.
Here.
What color
here?
Here's some chairs.
Well, you'll have to write yours on a separate sheet of paper. How's that?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do this.
All right, so you should have gone through the reviewing chapter 8 from Leaders of Their Own Learning, which is what we did last year, and then the first 8 pages of our new book, which is called So What Do They Really Know? So the first thing that we're going to do is look at So What Do They Really Know? Out of that book, you read one story about a teacher who had a discussion with a child that she knew cheated but made 100, and she wanted to know why the child cheated. So at the end of the discussion, he walks out of her office and she says, I was disappointed that he had cheated, but in a way he confirmed my suspicion. Just because a kid aces a test doesn't mean he knows and understands the material. So here's what I hear a lot, and I've heard this everywhere, but I've heard this a lot since I started this position. And there's two sides of this coin. Okay, so when we look at letting a child, okay, our overall job, what's our job as a teacher?
To teach.
Teach the students.
What?
Teach the students.
My content area.
Your content area, okay? And how do you know what your content area is? So you got your standards. So how do I know that my student is getting all of my content area or all of the standards that I am trying to get them to master? Well, some of us are of the persuasion, I hear two different things on mastering the content. Either I gave it, they didn't get it, I'm moving on, because you don't get second chances in life. Or I gave it, they didn't get it, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it again, because practice makes perfect. So your child that's in your class is hearing two different things all the time. Practice makes perfect. Keep trying. You should do it over and over, especially in sports. Do it over and over and over and over until you get really good at it. Except not in my class, because you don't get no second chances in life. Well, you kind of do get second chances in life. For instance, how many of you actually turned in Educate Alabama on time?
Boom.
The rest of you got second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth chances on that. That's just an example. But yes, you get extra chances in life. There's very few times that you're not going to get a second chance in life. But regardless of that misnomer, whichever. You have to actually weigh the pros and cons on how that affects which student in your class. So what I want for you to do in your group is you should have a column chart that has both your choices listed on there and pros and cons for each. So you're going to brainstorm in your group the pros and the cons of telling a child you don't get second chances in life on whether or not they can make up an assignment. And then the pros and cons of practice practice makes perfect, so just keep trying if you told that to a teacher, to a student. So we're going to take about 10 minutes for you to discuss that at your table. You may begin.
Yes. Over there by Dr. Davis.
When I get pulled over, it's what happens. I'm not saying. Tell them I need a second chance.
And the problem is, that's just like coming in your house saying, I'm not finished.
At some point, they have to, like I said, if you don't pay your taxes on time, yeah, you can pay them later. But you're not paying them. So if you put all our names, then we need to realize you're doing it that way.
I'll order. I just chose to order. I don't know if Kelly has one. I like to keep the library.
Me too. Yeah, during the game, and during the game,
That's the woman that. She's got all the knowledge. We talk about you. You got any extra books? No.
how about leaders?
About the leaders of our own learning.
I don't even have to those.
Oh,
But that book, never looked at that one online.
Put that on.
I think I was paid $6 for that Amazon for it. Second one though. What did they do? I like that better than I like that.
If I feel like I can always do it. I mean, seriously, no, but either, but that's what it is. I know. I don't have to talk about it. So I don't try. You're doing
You got 5 minutes.
Practice makes skill.
So you get a second chance, but there's still consequences for what you did the first time. And I think that's what our students miss sometimes, is we give them a second chance.
Instead of
Available
Build self-esteem.
Hey, you got 1 minute. Let's start.
Not all.
Are there expired results out yet? They've been out.
They've been
Okay, our time is up. If you at your table will raise your hand when your table is finished discussing.
I don't think they heard it.
Hold your hands up when you're finished discussing.
Hold your hands up when you're done discussing.
Okay, great. As I walked around, I heard some of the same pros, some of the same cons. And we're not going to get into discussing those two, but I do want you to keep them in mind as we go through the rest of today's study. But what I did hear a lot of was intrinsic motivation. There was a lot of, I wouldn't really have this problem if my students would take accountability, if they would be responsible for their own learning, if they would get on board with making sure that they got from me what they needed, if they understood what they needed and they made sure that they got what they needed. And when you related that to real life examples, that was the same thing you were saying. Okay, if I knew what I needed to do, exactly what the consequences were, and then I would get it done, because that's how it goes in real life. Well, we have a teacher who is trying this year to put that into place. She's trying standard-based grading in an effort to get them to take active control of their own learning. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about how she is rolling that out in her classroom and what that looks like in her classroom and some of the ups and downs that she's going through. So, Ms. Young, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So last year, at the beginning of the year, I decided that I had about 7 or 8 skills that I knew that we would be using in class all year in science. And I focused in with my honors physical science last year, and I had these several skills that we were going to use, and I decided I wanted to do a standards-based grading for those. Okay, and I just did it for the first time with those 2 honors physical science classes. However, looking at the new course of study for science, it says that all science teachers are supposed to be using standard scientific notation. All science teachers are supposed to be using significant figures, and there's a whole list of things that we're all supposed to be doing. So I decided this year to go ahead and take those skills and then apply them both not just to my honors physical science, but my standard marine biology, which I have 5 marine biologies. So I've been doing this mostly with standard students, and I've done it with, I'm doing it with one of my honors physical science classes now. You have you did just give them this.
I did.
Now this is actually from a test that I gave to one of my
honors physical science students, but I will say that because these are skills that are all science, all students are supposed to have, all students are supposed to be using these skills in all science classes, that this test, even though it says honors physical science, I use the same questions for marine biology because I was testing the same day. And the only difference is that there are 2 or 3 of them that for my marine science, I counted those categories at this point when I gave this. There were 2 or 3 on here that would count as a pretest still because some of my kids in marine science still needed more time to get some of these skills. But the honors physical science student, they were responsible for everything on here with the exception of, there was one category that you see where it says calculate with significant figures. I decided since I think very, very few, it was very, very few that I would count that one as a pre-test for that. I decided I was just still not ready. I didn't have the data that I needed for it and I wasn't comfortable with it. So, but if you look at these numbers, if you wanted to count this like a unit test on here, this person has a pretty good grade. We'll know a 70, and overall I think a 70 in the class at one end. But she's got passing. She's got an average grade, but there's 1, 2, 3. 3 objectives on here that she's really not getting. Okay, 3 objectives that she's not getting at all. And so I have a chart up here. These are actually some scores from my marine science class. And I have objectives 1 through 12. And I think 11 of them, we'll go ahead and count at least 11 of those as part of my unit test. Okay? And can y'all see the red, what's in red? We can't see that as well, so I'll have to tell you what's over here. In this row right here, I have a student who has a 95 overall average in my class. That's everything, habits of work, everything. She has a 95. And these are the objectives that I have tested her on. And so 91, doing really well, 50. She has a 50 here. The traditional unit test, if I had given this just as a traditional score, she would have made a 91 on that unit test. 91. However, there's one objective that she did not get at all. Really didn't get. She got half, but she didn't get it. And since I've been doing this, I just want to say I've had so many eye-opening experiences, and the reason I'm saying this now is because the person who has this 50 came up to me today and said, Miss Young, I really need to know what I need. I've got a 50. What's going on? And I said, well, we're going to be doing that test debrief tomorrow. I just put that in, but she was keeping up with her grades. She said, I've got a 50. And I said, well, we're going to talk about that and see what you need to do to improve that score. And she was very thankful, even though she has a 95 average, an overall 95 average. She was fine. She's got a grade, 95. But she came up to me as soon as the bell rung, and she was very concerned because she had a 50 in something, and it meant she didn't understand whatever that 50 was in. So she's wanting to know, what can she do? So that's kind of our kid at the upper, and we expect them to do that a lot. However, if I had just given her a traditional score of 91, there's a good chance she may not have come to me about that one specific. Well, she made an A. She may not have come to me. She made an A. Okay? So let's look at the next child. The next child has an 82 average. You can see some really good scores on there, 97, you can see some 100s, but oh my goodness, there's a 20. Here's a 25, a 67, and a 50. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 areas where this child really is not getting those skills, so we complain. what, you know, when we're trying to teach something and we're trying to teach something that has been built on, and it really depends on the fact that that child last year really learned about this over here last year, and we're complaining that we're having to reteach this because we're supposed to teach this. We're reteaching, and we're complaining because we're reteaching. Well, the fact is, your B student, yes, you have to reteach your B student on the traditional grading with getting grades, because that B student last year didn't get those 5 objectives or 5 other objectives at all. But they made a B and it was okay. They moved on. They made a B. They never got those. So yes, are you reteaching? Yes, because there's whole skills, at least 5 sometimes, that a B student is not getting. And then you look at the C student. The C student, we've got 2 zeros, didn't get it all. But you know that's supposed to be, we've got that highlighted, that's supposed to be your average student. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, it worked out statistically for 4 of them. All of these are real numbers. They come from my grade book. So this person has a 54%, would have had a 54% on the traditional unit test score when I figured that up. A 54%. The person here, the 82, since you couldn't see that, they made a D on the test, that unit test. Somehow they've got a B overall because maybe they've got, you know, these certain categories.
Did you redone it?
Oh, and we have redone. Like, for example, within this unit test, this was not the first time, by the way, that they did some of these sections. During the whole unit, when we're going over something, first of all, I do a pretest. If I have kids, I'll tell kids what to study ahead of time. If they master an area on a pretest, they've earned that score, and that goes in the computer. The score doesn't go down. While we're covering that, I may even pop in and do like 5 questions one day on one test. I don't feel comfortable enough to actually call it a quiz for everybody, but I want to see how much everybody's learning. I may call that a practice test, and guess what? If you earn a good score, you keep that score. It was technically a formative assessment on my part. I wanted to see what people were learning, but I've got 5 kids who've already snagged that skill. They already have it. So I'm recording that score in there, okay? And then I'll do a test. But then let's say I've done, at one point basically I did a test that went from here to here. This was a test, okay? And some of those kids, they didn't do well, so when it came time for the unit test, I did from here to here, okay? And then these scores may not have been 100 that first time. Those scores might have been a 20, a 50, but when I gave them that unit test, there were sections that they could go back to. If they did these areas over here and they still had time, they could go back and repeat some of these previous sections and make a higher score. So they're continually working to improve these skills for each one.
And this average over here includes your habits of work.
Yes, and it very much
Over in the
includes.
red, you're one and done.
Right. So this definitely includes habits of work, lab activities, all the things we're doing. Now this is the one that I'm most embarrassed about. I'm horrified and mortified and all that. This student has a 60. Would have made a 35 on the test. This person knows safety skills and science, and this person knows a few prefixes, but not all of them. And I'm really embarrassed because this person might get in gear a little bit and do a little bit better on the next few. Somehow pull, I don't know. I mean, this person might not pass the 9-week exam, so it might be a failure anyway. But what if that person still gets through with a 60, and I'm still looking at numbers like this, and goes to that teacher next year, and the teacher says, I'm having to reteach everything. Yes, you're having to reteach everything because that person only really mastered one thing right out of all of these. Yes, you're having to reteach because they can pass without mastering very many skills. Okay, so even if this person kicks it in a gear and goes ahead and masters 2 or 3, look at how many that person's not mastering, and they're still going to pass. And that next teacher, yes, you're going to reteach because it's okay. That's what in their mind, it's okay. Because I can pass without learning everything. It's okay. Because literally, that's the number that passes them.
So should a kid be able to pass every objective to pass the class?
I mean, that's something to think about, but if they're, I reteach. Like, for example, scientific notation is 2 of the objectives up here. I can't remember which ones. They have to be able to convert a number to scientific notation and convert a number from scientific notation to from 1 to standard. But that's not the real objective. That was the 8th grade objective that they're supposed to learn in 8th grade. My objective is I'm supposed to, when we do labs, they're supposed to be able to use numbers that are in scientific notation when they're solving problems and analyzing data. But I can't do that. I can't just teach that. They don't know that 8th grade objective, that it was okay. They passed without knowing. But they can't calculate unless they can convert. And they're still not going to ever be able to calculate if they still don't have to convert it. They're just not. So I have to reteach those. I can't. There are other skills. For example, I want to do labs where we measure with a graduated cylinder to get data. But and those of you that teach ag, I know y'all are measuring all the time, right? And it's so frustrating. Yes? I mean, and we have to, on top of that, we're supposed to get them to learn how to measure with significant figures. There's a difference between 5.0 and 5. 5.0 means you can measure to the 10th place, but it happened to be right at the money, 5. 5 means you could measure to the 1's place. I'm going to have a hard time explaining that when they're still not sure it's 5 or not, or 4.7 or 3.2. You know, they're having a hard time measuring. So I'm having to reteach because it was okay in previous years that yes, they could come to me, literally pass, and not have those skills. So I have to. So yes, that's why we're having to reteach. Yes. Okay, that's good. And I'm sorry I didn't explain. This was a skill. This objective 7 was one that I decided that they had more time to get. Is actually one that I decided that they could as soon as I saw that they earned that, I was going to record it. It was called Using Units, and it actually was not a specific question. I looked at the whole test, and I looked at see how they were using their units, like centimeter, were they including them? And when they get to the point where I feel really like I know it's something that's not really numerical, but I'm awarding that. And that person has not been awarded that, but I'm not going to give them a 0 because it's something that I'm awarding. It's a different way to think about it. And then this one is still a pretest. And this person hasn't earned it, but these students have earned those with the higher numbers. Now, we did include these 102s. So this is one of the things that I've come up with. If you see something up here in the middle that has a 102, what that means is a student has not only made a 100 on it, but it has made a 100 more than one time. And they are consistently showing me that they have not only mastered that skill, but they're maintaining that skill. And I'm rewarding them for maintaining and mastering and maintaining that skill. But statistically, this 102 actually doesn't change things a lot when you have all of those numbers. But that's okay.
It's not on the test, so when they get the 100 on the test, if they do it again, they get 100 on it again.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to explain. So like this one right here, where it says convert numbers in scientific notation to standard form, if that person had already made a 100 on that objective, then in the grade book, or on the next one, the next time they did it, I would record a 102. Because they had already earned the 100, but they tried it again. even though I didn't make them go back and redo the ones that they had already done. Because I have, on every test, it just, the way it turns out for mine, and it just works for me, I have pre-test questions, I have the real test, and I have the retest questions. And some kids are not going to get to the pre-test questions because they are still doing retest. But the kids who really love that, they just get excited about, like they're getting ahead and everything, they don't have to worry about the retest because they're going to make sure they've got the pre-test. And then if they still have time, they're going to go back and do the retest so they can get the extra 2 points out of every section. It's very, very motivating. When I pass these back, another thing I want to mention is that I pass them back and I heard a kid go, I got 3 100s. You know, this kid may not have been one that ever gets a 100. They're just, I mean, how many kids really do rock that 100 every time? I've got one child that knows that kind of success. I've got one child that's really never known that that success for the 100 every time. You know, and I'm you know, God knows what he's doing, but I got my one that knows only success came second. I think my whole perspective on things would be a lot different if he had come first. You know, so the other one's worked really hard to get where he is, and he's only done improving. But my youngest child, you know, he's only known those 100. So you get kids that are like, I got that 100, Ms. Young. And they did. They got 100, and then they got some they still need to work on. And they really get excited. And even my Marine, I have five classes of Marine, so I'm not making it up. Most of my kids that I'm doing this with now are standard kids. And yes, at some point, there's a lot of frustration. Now, I've got to go ahead and tell you this part where I'm all excited and everything. I have overwhelmed myself with it. I have watched the kids get angry, very angry with me. We're about to knock heads again because we're doing a test debrief tomorrow. And at some point, there's going to be a few of them who it hasn't sunk in, and it's going to finally sink in. It's going to finally sink in that Ms. Young actually wants me to learn this. And they're angry that they're going to actually have to learn it.
Would that be that 60 then?
And it could be that 60, but it also could be, let me tell you who else it could be. It could be this person, because Ms. Young has these certain assignments that I give out, which I haven't started really yet, but these assignments that some people get exempted from because they already have that skill. And these other students are really not happy because they're like, Ms. Young, why do I have extra practice for scientific notation? Well, honey, you need extra practice. You didn't show me a mastery skill. So you need to turn in this habits of work grade where you're giving more and more practice. And that, at that point, we butt heads again. Okay? And they get really angry. And I can tell you all this because I did it last year with just that one class, my honors physical science. And there were a few that really got angry with me. Ooh, it was like breathing.
I think one of them said, I don't want to learn, I just want the grade.
Yes. Ms. Young, we don't, one time one student said, Ms. Young, we don't care about learning, we just need to know we just want to be able to pass. And so, but
this takes that totally out of the mix.
And so, those kids that I keep pushing, and that I pushed last year, it eventually really paid off. They would, you know, I remember one just like, I'm only here after school because my mom made me, and I was going back through everything with them. And that student's back with me this year because he really wanted to be with my class. But because by the time he got through it and he pushed through that barrier, he was so proud of himself. But we went through a really angry stage until we got to that proud of ourselves stage.
We talk about the incentives.
I do a lot of incentives in my class besides the fact that this is intrinsically, it does do a lot of motivation. I started last year with my 7th period giving out stickers a lot more often, and they got used to it. And I enjoyed it, so I decided to go ahead and implement it with all my classes. And so I give out little cards, I cut out things that doesn't have to be stickers, but I print off stuff. And I just give them out when students ask good questions. I give them out when They answer questions really well. I give them out when they back up their answer, and they decorate their notebook with them. And so they'll say, well, am I going to get bonus points, Ms. Young, for all these that I'm decorating? I said, no, that's for you to figure out. You know, by the end of the year, you're going to get to see how much that you've got in your notebook, and it's going to decorate your notebook. And I have boys, junior and senior boys. I know you don't believe me, but they are, Ms. Young, what do we need to do to get a robot? Because I was passing out robots one day. And they put their name on them, and they put them on the door. And then some of them, they put them in their notebook. I had meant to bring you notebooks to show you where they're decorating them, but you'll just have to take my word for it. They get really excited, and it actually surprised me how excited they got last year with with the one class I did, so I decided to go with it this year. And I just haven't had any kids that just aren't excited. They'll come up to me if I forget to give it to them. And I also give these little badges. So let's say if they have a mastery score in these two columns, for example, I've got the Significant Pumpkin Badge, Significant Pumpkin Award, and I give that to everybody who can not only determine the number of significant figures, but also calculate with significant figures. So they get a certain badge, and then they just put that in their notebook. It doesn't count for points, but they like it, and they ask for it, even though I would not think that I'd have so many junior and senior boys in a standard class that would do it, and they do. Ms. Young, you forgot to give me my sticker yesterday. You didn't give me my badge. Ms. Young, I had a student today. Ms. Young, why aren't you giving out badges today? I know I said I was going to give them out, but I'm going to have to do it tomorrow. I'm going to give it. You get the super dimensional pickles tomorrow, because that's one of the awards. You have to be able to do one-step and multi-step dimensional analysis to be able to get the super dimensional pickle award. He's got a red cape. He's really cool. And they just staple it in their notebook. That's it. And it's eye opener every day, and it's very hard. It's a bed of roses with a lot of thorns.
All right, questions?
What happens if a student never masters standards?
The thing is that my job is to do what I can, and I'm just going to keep pushing. And I may not be able to get everybody, but I feel like since I've been doing this, I'm getting more out of everybody than I ever have. So am I going to be able to get everybody to get 100% on everything? No, but I'm getting more out of my top students, I'm getting more out of my middle students, and I'm making my lower students really angry, and I'm getting a lot more out of them than I ever have. Yes, ma'am.
So you're custom creating assignments. How are you coming up with those?
Oh, you mean like if they don't do well with scientific notation?
Somebody has to practice more on objective.
I don't have to create that whole thing. I can I can print some of that off the internet if I want to. That's just a whole page of practice questions for that skill. It's been rare that I've had to completely make something up. I've even given kids the questions and the answers. Like if that doesn't work, send them home with both. Come back and show me you can do it. And I've given that. It just depends. There's all kinds of resources. If you've already got it on Planbook, but you've already got a video and you've already got all those extra resources, say go home and study those. You don't have to be reteaching in class everything. You can say, look, if you don't have this skill, I've got it on Planbook. You've got to go back and use your resources. So you don't have to kill yourself over trying to redo. Now, when you first with me, I'm learning as I go, and I think with anything you get better at it as you go, and so I'm going to become more efficient as I go through it. But the reward has been great, even though it's been really hard, and they get really angry. But it's like the girl that came up today. I didn't know she was going to do it. She just came up and she said, "What do I need to do about that 50?" And part of my brain just went, okay, yes, it's worth it. I'm going to keep going. There's just so many more rewards on my part that I get that just keep pushing me and pushing me.
Anybody else? No, go ahead.
So, like the objectives, they're all weighted the same, so safety is the same weight as significant figures?
Well, you know what? In the past, safety actually, I have to go back and reevaluate the way I've done things. In the past, I had a safety test, and that was one score. And in the past, this was a score. So actually, in the past, safety counted more. So actually, this was like 30 safety questions, and this might have been 5 questions. And when you're doing objectives like this, if you notice on mine, most of them aren't more than 6 questions per section. I have it memorized as I'm grading. I can grade it as I go. If there's 5 questions in that section, they missed one, that means they made an 80, and I keep going. I'm not calculating a grade at the end. Sometimes
If you'll notice, there's no total grade on this.
Right.
Each section is its own grade.
And that section at the top, that first one where they're measuring with significant figures, very few kids have that so far.
While we're on significant figures, let me just throw this in, that when we went to a review of our Aspire Score tests, they have it broken down as to where everything is taught and when it's tested. And so they had one section that was called number quantity, and we couldn't find an exemplar on that. We weren't sure what that was. So when the state lady came, we asked her, because it's only taught in high school, but on the test, they can have up to 5 questions of it on the test, and it counts, that section is the section that counts up to 67% on their ACT. Turns out, all that is scientific notation.
And it's not just scientific, it's actually solving those problems with
It's
numbers.
solving equations in chemistry and physics.
And the only kids who are taking that are Miss Word, you've got it covered, and I'm trying to do it with my students.
But our math and our science, and I talked to Mr. Adams about it a few weeks ago, and he started bringing it into his class. But we're going to have to bump that learning of that particular objective down so that our 10th graders are going to get on Aspire, but our 11th graders are going to be able to master that.
Is that writing significant figures and calculating?
It's not just writing, it's taking it to that next level, and it's solving with it, which I have showed them in the past, but I haven't really been good enough about giving them enough practice with calculating the scientific notation. Because I was
And
still
then they have to
struggling with
explain it.
teaching them how to do it.
Justification and explanation is 37% of the test. Grade it with on the math portion, yes. That's what I'm talking about. I'm speaking of math right now. I'm sorry. That was not on science. That's on math. Just relates to kids. All right, so tell me this. So how many of you would like to start the year with a chart like this from the previous teacher? So that you knew, okay, John Jones doesn't know this, and this. Would that be helpful? It's not, I mean, it's something I want you to talk about. First of all, I want to encourage you all to, it is very frustrating, and it takes a lot of patience, and I appreciate what Ms. Young has come and discussed with us, so let's thank her for that. And she'd be happy to answer any of your questions and help you if you wanted to get started with that. Before we go, I want to take about 5 minutes, and I want, on that section where it says notes, or if you filled that in, you can flip it over to the back on this paper that you picked up front. I want you to think about what your group put on the pros and cons. Now, obviously, this method goes with statement. Practice makes perfect. So just reflect on the practice makes perfect type of facilitating learning in your classroom, as opposed to the one and done, which is what we had in red over here, where you don't get second chances. So just take about 5 minutes to jot a few sentences of your thoughts about that. Number 24, we're going to read pages 9 through 15 And so what do they really know? And I need for you to answer the 2 questions at the bottom of page 15. Did you get my email? My hangout? About doing your SWBAC next. So Miss Elliott will be our Miss.
Miss Elliott, you're the good person.
All right,
Individually or by group? Or question?
individual.
Yeah, I don't know.
Two sides of thoughts there, and I myself get caught in the middle. Years and years ago, I would have probably been more of a one and done guy. Now I would probably more of a get a second chance, figure out how to get the information covered before I get to the end. You know, it was interesting listening to the discussions about which way. And it almost rolls down into if you don't get a second chance type. It's like it's an absolute. If that makes sense. Again, as I've grown older, and I will not say wiser, just older, I still kind of come back to this inkling of, you know, if you don't get it the first time, there's a chance that you can still get it. And I know a lot of you guys in your classes, you do this, I think you do this a little more natural than what you realize. But at the end of the day, we've got to understand that, and I hope you're doing it with your test. If you give an assessment, like the one where everybody missed number 4, you know, if everybody's missing, I mean, those are the things in the classroom and your instructional practices that you've got to reflect on. Now, you're going to toss it out there, and there's going to be some that are not going to do what they got to do. And I know it comes down to, what was it, motivation and responsibility. Those were the 2 pieces of that puzzle. Now, if I had the solution, or if we had the solution to motivation and responsibility, man, this game would be licked. This would be easy. But there's no way to open the head and pour it in there. I wish there was. But that's part of what being a great teacher is about, is more than just throwing out information. Being a great teacher is finding out that connection of what gets a student an opportunity to go above and beyond. Okay? Sometimes our kids need a second chance. Sometimes they don't. And there may be, you may go through this and go, yeah, I'm going to give retakes. And then you may go through one and say, this test is an absolute. You get one shot. But that's the whole piece of what my goal with this environment is thinking about instruction day in and day out and how that can get better. Okay? And I think as a whole, we've done a great job over the last 3 years of really looking and thinking about instruction. And that's what it's about. Now, if we had the motivation and responsibility piece, you know, we'd be a lot more, we'd probably be doing something else and probably making a lot more money. But that's the part of being a great teacher, okay? And so you got to find those tricks. You got to find that, okay, to motivate the kids to do their best, all right? If you ain't ever had a second chance, raise your hand. Or if you've had a second chance, raise your hand. Okay, so you got to think about that sometimes. And I do know there's got to be some absolutes. Don't get me wrong. Okay? We do have some absolutes built in. All right? Thank you for what you're doing.
I wanted to answer one question really quick. When someone asked about whether or not you master all of them, one of the reasons that I had you put your top 5 standards is those are the ones that have to be mastered. They have to come away with 100 on that section. The rest of those that are up there on that line, you're going to try to get them as close to 100 as you can. But the 5 that you listed, those are your absolutes. They have to get there. If we have to teach it 16 times, we teach it 16 times. Those are the ones they have to get in order to move on. So that, I forgot to answer that question.
And that's kind of where we're at in education right now. I know the testing stuff is out there, but we've got this flexibility a little bit to say, in my class, with my subject, these are the 5 things that my kids are going to be good at. Now, typically, those predicate what will be, those are some things that they'll need next year. All right? And that's that building block. Okay? Hopefully, we've got through the madness and the chaos of homecoming. Thank you. You did a great job. We survived. Hopefully, we'll get in just into a routine. All right, so that we can just have school. We have 9 weeks exams coming up. 2 weeks. I will put something out probably by Wednesday to give everybody a time of testing times. Okay, and then we'll talk about a few more things on Monday. All right. Please understand the best thing that we do throughout the day is our regular classroom instruction. And that's what I want you to always go back to. It matters. And you're doing a great job. And I want you to, as frustrating as it gets sometimes with knuckleheads, you still got to come in the next day and give them another shot. You got to come in the next day and give them another chance. Okay? You got to come in the next day and give them that opportunity. All right? And I thank you for what you do day in and day out. Anybody got any questions for me? Have a good day.